I'm just getting started.
So you wanna be starting something?
There's no one like you.
Got you. And mother always told me.
I knew you were different the moment you were born. You let your light shine into the world. Michael, I knew you were different the moment you were born. You're beautiful. You're the greatest of all time.
Be careful who you love.
I believe in you.
The Michael Jackson movie cut its own ending. The $15 million reshoot secret no one talked about. The Michael Jackson biopic is in theaters today. And before a single audience member buys a ticket, the story behind the film is already more dramatic than anything that made it onto the screen. Because here is what most people walking into theaters right now do not know. The movie they are about to watch is not the movie that was originally made. The ending was filmed. The most controversial chapter of Michael Jackson's life. The 1993 allegations, the police investigation, the $30 million settlement was scripted, shot, and edited. Scenes were filmed at Neverland Ranch depicting the investigation that shook the world. And then someone discovered a legal clause. And $15 million in reshoots later, none of it exists in the version you will see today. That is not a creative decision. That is not artistic vision. That is a documented legal constraint that forced the complete reconstruction of a major Hollywood film after principal photography was complete. And it raises a question that every entertainment journalist, every film critic, and every person buying a ticket this weekend should be asking out loud. When a legal settlement from 1993 controls what a 2026 film is allowed to show, what exactly are we watching? Let's go back to the beginning, because this story starts not in a theater, but in a courtroom, specifically in the settlement that ended the first major accusation against Michael Jackson. In 1993, Evan Chandler accused Jackson of sexually abusing his 13-year-old son, Jordan Chandler. The accusation became one of the most widely covered stories of that decade. Jackson denied everything. The case resulted in a $30 million civil settlement. A grand jury subsequently declined to indict Jackson on criminal charges. The settlement included confidentiality provisions, the kind that are standard in high-profile civil cases involving wealthy defendants and plaintiffs who agree to stop pursuing litigation in exchange for financial compensation. What was not widely known until this film went into production was that the settlement apparently contained a clause specifically restricting the depiction of Jordan Chandler or his family in any film project. Not restricting discussion, not restricting journalism, specifically restricting film. According to reporting from Variety, the original script for Michael did include the 1993 allegations storyline, the final third of the film, as originally conceived and shot. Delved into what happened between Jordan Chandler and Michael Jackson, including the police investigation, including the scenes at Neverland Ranch. Director Antoine Fuqua filmed those sequences. They existed. They were in the edit. And then during the editing stage, the legal team discovered the constraint. The Jackson estate was barred under the terms of the existing settlement from depicting Chandler or his family in any movie. Fuqua's film had done exactly that. The solution was $15 million in reshoots. The entire final section of the movie was reconstructed. The 1993 storyline was cut. The timeline of the film was pulled back to 1988, 3 years before the Chandler allegations would surface, and the story was reframed as ending at that point, as if Michael Jackson's life simply stopped there and the subsequent 3 decades never happened. That is what is playing in theaters today. Now, let's talk about what that decision actually means. There is a version of this story that the filmmakers and the Jackson estate would like you to believe. That version goes like this. The film was always intended to be about the making of Michael, about his childhood, his rise, his artistic development, his years with the Jackson 5 and his early solo career. It was always meant to end in 1988. The creative choice was intentional, authentic, focused. Colman Domingo, who plays Joe Jackson, Michael's father, explained this on the Today Show with Craig Melvin. He said the film was about how Jackson was raised, how he was trying to find his voice as an artist and become a solo artist. He said there is a possibility of a sequel that could address later events. He said this is a story about the making of Michael, not the unraveling of him. That explanation works until you know about the reshoots, because you cannot simultaneously claim a timeline ending in 1988 was always the creative intention, and explain away $15 million in reshoots that removed scenes depicting events from 1993. Those two facts cannot both be true at the same time. Either the film always intended to end in 1988, in which case why were those scenes ever filmed? Or the film originally included the allegations, was restructured under legal pressure, and is now being presented to the public as if it always looked this way. The paper trail says it is the second option. A leaked script reported by Puck News before the film's release described a version of Michael that, in their assessment, wanted very much to convince you Michael is innocent. That script included the allegations. That script included the storyline that the reshoots removed. And that script circulated enough that early backlash was already forming before a frame of the final film had been publicly screened. Here is what makes the legal clause the most important detail in this entire story. When a film about a real person is restructured, not because of creative decisions, but because of legal obligations rooted in a settlement from 33 years ago, it tells you something specific about the power dynamics surrounding this story. The $30 million paid in 1993 did not just end a lawsuit. It apparently purchased, among other protections, a constraint on how this story can be told in one of the most powerful mediums on earth, commercial cinema with major studio distribution. Jordan Chandler is now in his mid-40s. He settled a civil case as a 13-year-old child through his parents before he was old enough to fully understand what he was signing or what it meant. And the terms of that settlement, decades later, are still shaping what audiences in 2026 are allowed to see on screen. That is not just a film industry story. That is a story about the reach of settlement agreements, about what money can purchase in terms of narrative control, and about what happens when the legal architecture of the past determines the artistic possibilities of the present. The backlash to the film has come from multiple directions simultaneously, which is itself remarkable. Dan Reed, the director of Leaving Neverland, the 2019 HBO documentary that featured Wade Robson and James Safechuck, two men who claim Jackson sexually abused them as children, has been publicly critical of Michael, describing the project as an attempt to rewrite and dismiss serious claims. The Jackson estate sued HBO over Leaving Neverland, resulting in its removal from HBO Max. The estate has consistently denied all allegations, but the existence of Leaving Neverland and the 2 decades of documented accusations before it means that any film about Michael Jackson released in 2026 arrives in a context where the audience is not coming in without information. Paris Jackson, Michael's own daughter, spoke out against the film in a video posted on Instagram last September. She said, "A big section of the film panders to a very specific section of my dad's fandom that still lives in the fantasy." That is Michael Jackson's daughter, describing his authorized biopic in those terms. Janet Jackson declined to appear in the film. Her sister LaToya confirmed that Janet kindly declined to be depicted. Janet Jackson is arguably the most successful solo artist in the Jackson family after Michael himself. Her absence from an authorized biopic about her brother's life is not a minor footnote. It is a signal. The reviews, by most accounts, have been largely negative. Critics have described the film as taking an uncritical, rose-colored approach to its subject. An entertainment lawyer quoted by CNN said it plainly: "You cannot tell the story without telling the whole story. The good, the bad, and everything in between." The film's star is Jaafar Jackson, Michael's nephew, the son of Jermaine Jackson. His casting carries its own complicated weight. Jaafar's resemblance to his uncle is striking, and his performance has been described as committed. But the question of whether a film produced by the Jackson estate and starring a member of the Jackson family can provide any meaningful critical perspective on Michael Jackson's legacy is a question the film never seriously attempts to answer. And then there are the new allegations. In February 2026, 4 now adult members of a family who had been close to Jackson filed a lawsuit in which they accused him of being a serial child predator who drugged, raped, groomed, and sexually assaulted them while they were children. The suit includes charges of sex trafficking, with some of the alleged crimes occurring during interstate and international travel, including stops on the Dangerous World Tour. Jackson maintained his innocence throughout his life. His estate continues to deny all allegations. But the timing of those new allegations, filed months before the film's release, means the film opened into a news environment where its subject had been named in active litigation. The film does not address any of this, because the film ends in 1988. Here is the number that tells you everything you need to know about where this story stands commercially and culturally. The film is projected to be one of the biggest box office openings of 2026. Audiences will show up. The music is extraordinary, and the film's use of it is, by most accounts, its strongest element. Michael Jackson's catalog speaks for itself. The Jackson 5 years, the early solo years, Thriller, Off the Wall. This is some of the most significant popular music of the 20th century, and watching it rendered on screen with the visual language of a major studio production is going to land for a lot of people regardless of what is missing. But missing is the operative word, because what the $15 million reshoot removed was not an abstract subplot. It was the hinge on which everything that follows turns. The 1993 allegations are not a footnote to Michael Jackson's life. They are the dividing line between everything that came before and everything that came after. They are the moment when the king of pop became something more complicated and more contested. and a biopic that ends in 1988 because of a settlement clause from 1993 is a biopic that stops the story exactly at the last moment before that dividing line appears. That is not a coincidence. That is architecture. Watch the film if you want to. The music alone may make it worth your time, but watch it knowing what it is. Watch it knowing that the final act you are seeing was not the final act that was originally created. Watch it knowing that $15 million was spent to ensure that what you see today looks the way it does. Watch it knowing that a legal document signed in 1993 is still determining what stories can and cannot be told about one of the most famous people who ever lived. And then ask yourself the question that no studio press release, no Today Show interview, and no authorized cast appearance will answer for you. If the story that was removed was not damaging to Michael Jackson's legacy, why did it cost $15 million to remove it? The film is in theaters now. The ending was reshot, and the clause that required it is still sealed. Let's talk about what this means for the broader conversation about authorized biopics, because Michael is not the first film to run into this problem, and it will not be the last. The biopic as a genre has always struggled with the gap between what happened and what can legally be shown. Defamation law, privacy rights, and settlement agreements all create invisible walls around the stories of real people, walls that audiences cannot see but that filmmakers navigate constantly. What makes Michael unusual is not that those walls exist, is that this particular wall was discovered late enough in the process to require $15 million to work around it. That timing matters, because it tells you that the people making this film did not know, going into production, that the Chandler settlement would prevent them from depicting what they were planning to depict. The clause was not flagged in pre-production. It was not caught in the script approval stage. It was discovered during editing, after the scenes had been filmed, after the money had been spent, after the story had been constructed around material that turned out to be legally off-limits. That is either a significant failure of legal due diligence for a major Hollywood production, or it is a clause that was genuinely obscure enough that even experienced entertainment lawyers missed it until the footage existed. Either possibility tells you something uncomfortable about how this film was made. Director Antoine Fuqua has spoken publicly about his skepticism towards some of the allegations against Jackson, suggesting in interviews that financial motives may have influenced certain claims. That is a perspective he is entitled to hold, but it is also a perspective that, in the context of a $300 million authorized biopic, is not a neutral artistic position. It is a position that aligns with the commercial and reputational interests of the Jackson estate, which controls the music rights without which the film could not exist. The music rights are the key to understanding every decision this film makes. Without the Jackson estate's cooperation, there is no Thriller on screen. There is no Billie Jean. There is no Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. The visual and emotional power of a Michael Jackson biopic is inseparable from the catalog, and the catalog is controlled by the estate. That dependency does not make an honest account of Jackson's life impossible, but it does mean that the filmmakers were always operating with a ceiling above them, a ceiling defined not by what the evidence supports or what the art requires, but by what the rights holder will allow. The $15 million reshoot is what happens when a film bumps against that ceiling at the worst possible moment. So watch the film, listen to the music, let yourself feel what it felt like when these songs first existed in the world, because that part is real and undeniable. Michael Jackson's artistry was extraordinary by any objective measure, and the film's presentation of it, from the Jackson 5 years through Off the Wall through Thriller, is by most accounts the strongest argument for the film's existence. But hold both things at once: the music and the missing ending, the performance and the $15 million silence, the authorized version and the version that was filmed, edited, and then erased, because the story that was removed is still out there, in the original footage, in the reshoots that replaced it, in the Puck News leak, in the Variety reporting, in the Chandler settlement that nobody has fully read. It did not disappear. It was just moved off screen. And off screen is where the most important parts of this story have always lived.